Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French and English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanantlag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our sixth episode of season 14, a special guest and gender awareness expert, Savannah Hauk. And just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Savannah, the floor is yours.
Thanks, but I can't follow any of that introduction you did from yourself. That was pretty impressive, I have to say. That being said, my name is Savannah Hauk. I am a biological male, gender diverse, dual gender person. I live a predominantly male life. Actually, I am in the car right now on break for my job in male mode, but I also have a very strong and very positive and very vocal and visual and public persona as Savannah Hauk. I go and do podcasts. I've done 2 TEDx talks. I write books, self-help about gender diversity and kind of understanding who you are. And yeah, just that's what I have a podcast as well. So, we match in that way. Again, still not as impressive credentials as you, Dr. Dan, but I will try to hold my own with you as we go.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And like, even with my credential, they call this as alphabet letters. There's so many letters after my name, but it doesn't, I lost track after a while. But let me ask you a few questions. Now, you said that you are you wanted to be called Savannah, but you have a male voice. You predominantly live your life as a male. So when do you start thinking that today I want to be a female?
Well, I mean, it all started once upon a time. It all started about 5 to 6 years old, where I had just a natural inclination to be attracted to what my sister was wearing and what my mother was wearing. Looking at their body styles versus like who I was as a little boy, and that always stuck with me. And that was my pre-adolescence, and then when moving to adolescence, I borrowed things from both of their drawers and tried things on and put on the heels. And, a lot of times it's very benign. Kids do that all the time. They dress up in their mom's heels and parade around the house because they like to hear the clicking on the carpet or on the hardwood. But for me, it wasn't that. It was, I knew even from an early age without really understanding it, I knew that was part of me that I just couldn't express or understand. So it took years and years. It took to my mid-20s before while I was dressing feminine periodically, but in secret and in a closet, as so many people do, it took my mid-20s and a move to New York City to recognize there were other people out there who were drag, who were gay, who were living a different lifestyle than I had known in the Midwest, growing up in the 70s and 80s. So in my mid-20s, I finally said, I am a transvestite, which as soon as I said the words was kind of yucky in my mouth. So quickly moved to crossdresser. And that's, both still had a lot of stigma to it. Anything that's tranny related in the 80s, 90s, very stigmatized. It's like a word that's being taken back. We're taking back that word for ourselves. RuPaul is doing a great job of talking that talk and making it like our word. So here I am now, 2023, moved from New York City, Long Island, to the South of America, and where, pretty conservative, Bible Belt, Baptist, everybody's carrying guns, Confederate flags, all those things that you're like, wow, this is probably not the place that Savannah wants to be. But it, in actuality, became enlightening, because I couldn't hide in New York, going to like private events or clubs or just things like at night and not in the daytime. I actually, coming here, opened my eyes to the fact that diversity was needed here, and that I could be public. I could have a public face. I just go out on Sundays, hashtag Savannah Starbucks Sundays, go out every Sunday as Savannah as my requisite day to do it, just my routine to go to a coffee shop, do my work, do my writing, catch up on things, catch up with friends. And while I lead a very male-centric life, 90% of the time, I spend the majority of my day on Sundays as Savannah, doing as much work as Savannah as I do as Chuck. So
where do you feel comfortable in, Savannah? As Savannah or as Chuck?
Both. The only difference is that when it's a question I get a lot, because there's so much more effort put into being Savannah. As a genetic male, you have to know makeup, you have to have body shaping, you have to do a lot of things to make the presentation look as the ideal in your head of what you want to look like. And not only is that for feeling good about myself, but it's also an act of protection. It's a shield. The more passable, and this is a terrible thing to have to say, but the more passable and unclockable you are, the safer you are. So for me, that's very, very important to have that shield, that protection of being, people walked past me and didn't even notice me. So it's about standing out and blending in the same breath. So while it takes so much work to be Savannah, Chuck has existed from birth, right? Genetically male, you go through life, you don't really think about yourself in that way. You don't think about your identity, you just are. So for years and years and years, Chuck just was. Chuck just is. I don't have to prove myself to be a male, but there's a lot to be done to get that same effect as in a feminine form. So I'm very comfortable in my male self. I've got a little scruff on the face most times, but Sunday comes, the razor comes out, and the wig comes on, the heels go on, and it's enlightening. There's a different sense to that experience. Because it's almost like a dog that's crated, that you let the dog out and they get to run around and they're very elated to be out. But yet a lot of times that crated dogs are very comfortable in their crates too. Even with the door open, that's like they just enjoy that. So it's probably should be like referring myself to as a dog, but it's kind of allegorical of, Savannah loves to live and loves to be out in the world. Like just being at home, like dressed up, walking around the house is not going to make me feel like a real person. Whereas Chuck doesn't have any of those hangups about, I can be at home all day. I can, watch Netflix for 10 hours and be a couch potato. It doesn't matter because that's just Chuck is. But, Savannah does have something to prove in a lot of ways, and is very validating to be able to go out into the world and be seen as a real person. And that in and of itself, either where people ignore you or they compliment you, or people know you in both guises, it's very much fulfilling, and it fulfills that feminine spirit that I need to express.
So when did you get inspired to be called Savannah? Where did you get that name from? And was it because in Savannah, Georgia, or has nothing to do with it?
The second part, nothing to do with it. I just happened to come to a place where every other person's name's Savannah.
Okay.
But in New York in the 90s, I was looking for a name. And, the old drag trope is like your first pet in the street you grew up on. And I always tell people I was never going to call myself Shaggy. So that was not going to work as my first pet. So I was looking for something that was exotic, feminine, but not trampy. Nothing with like, an I instead of a Y kind of thing. So I just didn't want like, the typical Jennifers or Don. I don't know. I wanted something a little more exotic. So for whatever reason, I'm just sitting at home one day and Savannah popped in my head. And I'm like, that sounds perfect. So I'm going with that.
Beautiful. Now, let me ask you a question that may be very sensitive in nature. Okay. Which is still, and as me as a therapist, I need to understand that a little bit more. So let's say if someone is a male, okay, born male, they go through gender reassignment to become a female, but they're attracted to men. Does that make them gay because after the gender reassignment, or how does that work exactly? Because now they're female and they're attracted to the opposite gender, which is male. Does that make them originally gay or not?
Well, that is a very interesting question. It's very multifaceted. I
Mhm.
will say for myself, one of the first of three questions I typically get, not now, but like in the past, is when you say you're a crossdresser, the first thing you assume is like, oh, are you gay? You like men? And that's not true. I'm a heterosexual male. So in both guises, I'm attracted to women and the feminine. In terms of your example, what you have to understand is, again, sexuality and gender are completely different things. They are corollary, not causary. So you can't say, well, if biological male, therefore, if that was the case, then we'd have no gay men and no, lesbian women. It would just be like you would always love the opposite sex. So in the case you're expressing where somebody was born male, transitioned, fully female, either pre-op, post-op, doesn't really matter, and they are now dating men, really two questions come to mind. One, you're assuming what they were prior to transition.
Okay.
You're making assumptions like, well, you were male, so therefore you liked ladies. That's the way it was. They're like, well, no, I always liked men. You don't know that. Maybe at biologically they were homosexual, but once they transition and they know themselves to be a woman and they've known that their entire lives, but they were in the wrong body, then they were really always attracted to men. And as a woman in mind and spirit and now body, they're still heterosexual.
Okay. I see.
Okay. Okay. And then the second component is, well, when they grew up male in a very male centric, stereotypical, patriarchal, social acceptable, they may have dated women because that was what they were supposed to do. And they may have, decided, or not decided, they may have felt forced to, I have to, be with a girl because that's what boys do, all the while fighting their own identity gender wise but I'm in the wrong body. So every time they're with a girl, they felt like they were hetero, but yet also felt lesbian because in their head they were female, but genitalia wise they were male. So it's a very hard thing to even just take this one example and cookie cutter it into the right answer because everybody's experience of mind, body, spirit is so different. And the fact that just because you have genitalia of a certain type does not mean that that's indicative of what you like. And it's like you could just look at genitalia in the animal kingdom and in humanity and know that not everything is shaped the same way. There's syndromes where you can have female genitalia, but no vaginal canal to your uterus. You can have people hormonally who don't have the right delivery system, who present completely as female but are male genetically. So there's so many things at play that you can't just take this one example and say, well, if this, then this. I don't understand because it's so much deeper. It's so much more faceted. Every person you could talk to would have a different story of like who they like, who they love, how they see themselves. Yeah, it's a myriad. Yeah, it can't nail it down that quick.
So, but let's say we take the one of the most common example that most people like relate to, which is Bruce Jenner, and change from male to female, but this is in a permanent way. You said that you just do Savannah on Sunday.
Yeah.
So do people say, well, how come you cannot make up your mind either go which one way or the other and not either part-time male and part-time female? So how does that affect you in terms of like if someone knows you and they see you down dressed as Savannah, will he call you Chuck because he knows you as Chuck, or he'll call you Savannah?
I get it in all ways. I'll answer the second part first, which is my co-host for my podcast, the Fox and Phoenix podcast, for anybody listening. A little self plug there. She knows me and met me as Savannah. So, and even when we're texting, even when we're talking on the phone, she calls me Savannah because that's how she knew me. That's how she was introduced to me. I don't take any offense, even if I'm dressed as Chuck and on the phone with her. She just kind of sees me as Savannah, whereas a lot of people who've known me as Chuck will only call me Savannah when I'm presenting as Savannah. I went to a Starbucks and they know me as Chuck, and I went in as Savannah, and she's like, "Hi, Chuck," because she didn't know my name as Savannah. So I went up to her and said, "Hey, just to let you know, when I'm dressed this way, you could call me Savannah." She said, "Oh, I didn't know your name, and I wasn't sure what to do." But she was just so excited to see me. I was just so happy that she knew me, which was just, I always think is fun. So sometimes it's just educational.
Mhm.
But there are some people, and you see it a lot, especially with a parent or a sibling, a lot of family members, sometimes coworkers and friends, where even if you tell them, okay, my pronouns are different now, or if I'm dressed this way, please call me this way, and they won't do it. They won't respect who you are, either because it's so muscle memory to call you a certain thing,
Correct.
which can be forgiven. There's like some weird formula that says for as many years as somebody has known you as one way, then they get a pass for like X number of days per the years. So like if I know you for 10 years, you get 10 days to get it right, kind of thing.
Okay.
But some people just won't do it because they don't understand gender, or they don't understand what it is you're experiencing. So therefore, they're just going to stick with what they're going to call you, and they're like, it is kind of unsympathetic in a lot of ways, and sometimes it's ignorance,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's just they can't let go of that part, or they can't expand beyond what they already know.
So now for the first question.
I forgot what the first question was. I went on so long.
Well, the Bruce Jenner story about
Oh.
him going full time into female. Have you ever been asked, what about you going either full time, Chuck?
Oh, right.
Savannah.
Yeah, I struggled with that for years. In the 90s, I found a quiz online in the infant internet. It was like, how trans are you? And you see that a lot now. It's like you can take quizzes that says, how trans are you? And at the time I took it, and the questions were very pointed and repetitive. So you got a good, if you answered yes to one way and no the other way, but the same question, they kind of get you a gotcha on that. But they said I was right in the middle. And you have to remember, transness and gender, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I don't have to be a woman with trans experience or a man with trans experience, or I'm a trans man, trans woman. It's not just those things that get you to the cis normative again. It's a galaxy in and around all that you can be gender wise. You could be agender, you could be demigender, you can be gray gender. There's so many things of like, you could wake up one day and say, I'm going to be feminine, or you're going to wake up and say, no, I really need to be male today. A lot of it is state of mind. But for me, I am very happy with my parts. I'm very happy with living my male life. And for me, it's just the needed expression. And it doesn't have to be chemical, medical, surgical. I'm not looking to transition. It's just a matter of like, I would love it to be easier. I would love to be Savannah and not take as much work to do it. But barring that, it's just a matter of like, I do my best, I look my best I can, and go forward and just live and love that moment or those hours. There are some weekends I don't do it, either sick or tired or just not in the mood. There's some days where I've gone to conferences and been Savannah for like 5 days straight, sun up to sundown. And by the time you're ready to go home, you're exhausted from being that person.
Yes.
And it's not about being the person, because I am 50-50 Savannah and Chuck, feminine, masculine. That is my heart. It's like, it's always there. It's just a matter of like, yeah, I don't really want to put the effort in today to do that. And sometimes I get over it and I feel really good about the routine and ritual of becoming Savannah. But there are times I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I can go without today. It's okay.
But do you feel that in New York versus the South, do you feel that in New York you were more apt to go out without judgment versus that you are now in the South, or that has now not really bothered you in any shape or form?
I would say even when I was in New York, I spent many years in the closet and did not go out. And it partially is because of the relationship I was in, and they were disapproving, and kind of really just invalidated me. And I just, to keep the peace, I kept it at, in the closet as deep as I could. And then eventually I'm like, why? I mean, there's people out there, there's places I can get makeovers, I can go out to clubs and events. And I just decided enough for somebody else. I need to start doing for me. But there's still plenty of fear stepping out for the first time in New York. Doesn't matter that it's liberal as a state or as a county. There's still people with transphobia. There's still people who are going to accost you. There's still threats. There's still leering. There's still plenty of things that you can be fearful of. So I had that. Eventually got over it, made sure I was in safe places, made sure I was with friends, made sure you do all those things to keep yourself safe and protected. Coming down here, though, I spent 6 months like terrified. I mean, I'd spent years up in New York just going out, doing my thing, and come down here, I was instantly back in the closet for fear of what might happen in this conservative Bible Belt. Then I realized I was just as much wrong about the people I was seeing as I thought they might feel about me.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't, I have not once had anything more than maybe a triple look at me. Nobody's ever come up to me and given me a problem. Nobody's ever said anything untowards to me. And I know it exists, but apparently where I sit and where I go, nobody really minds. So I've actually been proven completely wrong about how the South would accept me. And I've met beautiful people here, lovely organizations, and everybody I've met has just been a blessing, honestly.
Have you found a community of people that actually share between the male and female, I would say, mindset?
Not as much, honestly. I mean, in New York, absolutely, is a whole. It was a whole community that you could reside in. Down here, cross dressing is a little more closeted, as you know, no pun intended. But you don't find it. You don't find the people like out and about as much. You do, but not in mass. So I actually, when I came down here and finally realized I needed to step up and look elsewhere, you know, I was looking at PFLAG, looking at meetup groups, looking at other queer communities beyond just cross dressing or beyond just what people consider